Good afternoon and welcome to United MUFON. We have a wonderful meeting planned for you today, and I'm so glad that you could make it. Our guest today will be Dr. Irena Scott, who has quite an extensive and impressive background in ufology. I look forward to this interview and don't want to delay. However, good news is in the making here at MUFON. And as the Director of Training, I am now in the process of restructuring and streamlining training videos for MUFON University. And I will be upgrading the CMS within this year, hopefully. And even more good news is upcoming in regards to the restructuring process of the training program. But that I'm going to keep under my wraps. It's all so exciting. Stay tuned for more updates and announcements. MUFONites, we would love to hear from you here. If you would like to discuss your story or be a part of this program in any way, send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I'm really looking forward to it, actually. I have many interviews planned this year, and I'm already booking into 2023. So, with all of that, let's get started. So who are we and what is MUFON? And in case you don't know, we're the Mutual UFO Network. So who are we? We're the largest and oldest UFO investigating organization in the world, and with a huge member base adding to it every single day. We're represented in all 50 states and 40 countries with thousands of trained volunteer certified field investigators. We have over 50 PhD consultants in most disciplines, and we do conduct scientific investigations of the UFO phenomenon, while others are just UFO reporting agencies. We were established in 1969, and for the past 52 years, MUFON has compiled a database of over 175,000 UFO reports. Our CMS, known to us here and MUFON as the Case Management System, was developed in 2006 and goes through updating every year. As MUFON has evolved, we now monitor abductions as well as entity cases. So, how do we actually investigate what we do? Well, our certified field investigators use computer sciences, biology, astronomy, physics, chemistry, geology, engineering, and current statistics. That is how we do our scientific method here. We also have a mission statement. These are the words that inspire each and every one of us every day. We investigate UFO sightings, abductions, and entity cases. We promote research of UFOs with an eye towards science, and we educate the public on the UFO phenomenon. We do have a board of directors. David McDonald is our executive director. We've got a founding member, one of our originals, John Schuessler, who is behind MUFON, pretty much so. Myself, Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Rob Swiatek, Richard Beckwith, and Sandy Clevin. And A new announcement I've got to share is that Steve Hudgens Jr. is now the Director of Investigations, Director of Support Services, Director of International Development, and the Director of International Investigations. A lot of titles, and he's great at all of them. So, of all the UFO reports that we receive here at MUFON, approximately 15% of those are actually real. The others are misidentifications, optical illusions, stars, planets, unfortunately hoaxes, and sometimes hallucinations. But what about those remaining 15%? You know, that's what initially brought me to MUFON, to figure out what I had experienced. And that's the reason for MUFON's existence. You're not alone. And we do want to hear your story. So just go to MUFON.com and report your experience to us, and one of our certified field investigators will reach out to you. We do have a experiencer research team known as the ERT, and we are dedicated to helping experiencers of alien contact. Our current director is Dr. George Medich. A little bit of MUFON business, moving right along. Live every fourth Saturday of the month on Facebook. We are now United MUFON, and no longer doing an independent just YouTube channel. We're doing everything now on the Facebook Live United MUFON. So just go to United MUFON on Facebook and join us. We've got a symposium coming up in just a couple weeks. I'm so excited. I'll be out there in Denver. 2022 MUFON Symposium will be July 8th through the 10th. So please save that date. And if you can make it, if you're going to be out that way, please join us. We'd love to have you. This is really going to be just an epic year. UFOs are in the spotlight now more than ever, and this is what we'll be talking about. 2022 MUFON International Symposium in Denver. If you can't make it, just register, and we've got a live stream at MUFONsymposium.com. Our keynote speaker will be Cheryl Jones this year. We'll have speakers Michael Schratt, Kathleen Martin, Donald Schmidt, Dave Scott, Craig Campobasso, Paul and Joe Hynek, Peter Davenport, Ron James, Tom Reed, and Peter Robbins. Now, we've made a call out to MUFON through the journal for submissions, and who we're looking for is any MUFON certified field investigators or directors, international directors, or just members. And what we're looking for is we would like to welcome article submissions about case investigations, case analysis, international cases, and historical research on sightings or related phenomenon. So please contact and send any submission that you might have to the journal editor at MUFON.com. Some news that we've got here too. Tennessee MUFON is holding an Investigators Academy, which will be open to anybody, and that will be October 14th through the 16th of 2022, located in Townsend, Tennessee at the Highland Manor Inn and Conference Center. Please reach out to www.tnmufon.org to join. That would be Joshua Cross, Tennessee's state director. And also, we have a MUFON podcast. It's the official MUFON podcast with Richard Beckwith, and he's got an updated format and interesting subject matter each and every week. He does interviews and brings forth a lot of the latest issues within ufology. Just go to MUFON.com and join the podcast. As MUFON's Director of Memberships, I would like to invite you to join MUFON today if you haven't already. You'll receive an electronic or hard copy monthly journal, and those journals include amazing articles, and leading ufologists will do different papers that they'll submit to us, UFO sighting reports, abduction cases, mutilations, crop circles, just to name a few things, and it's very affordable. At MUFON.com, it's $59.88 for the entire year, and it's even broken down a little bit cheaper than that. You can go month by month. Just go to MUFON.com, log on, and choose the type of membership you'd like to be involved in. You can upgrade your membership as well to include MUFON TV. So that would be $119.88 for the entire year, or $9.99 a month. And that will include the live stream of the MUFON Symposium. You won't want to miss that, and that is an excellent deal for anybody that wants to stay home and watch the symposium from the comfort of your couch. And if you're interested in joining our team, which we would love to have you join, you'll become a MUFON member first and go to MUFON.com, click join. Then you would contact your local state director. Then you would sign up for online training or purchase your own FI manual from our website. Then you would take our certified field investigators exam, and you'll be on your way through MUFON University. And we would send you out with a mentor on all of your cases, your first 5 to 10 cases. And so you will never be alone. It will change your life forever, and you will enjoy it. It's so much fun to be a MUFON field investigator. And we would encourage you to look into that and join. Available now at the MUFON store are my very own I Know t-shirts. So now they're being sold through our online store. We have gaiters, we have so many different things, coffee cups, we have emblazoned logos on all of our apparel. So many fun and UFO type things that you would be interested in if you're into ufology at all. Go to the online store. You'll be pleasantly pleased. Next month, our meeting here at United MUFON, same time, July 23rd, 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern, is going to be Steve Hudgens, our MUFON Director of Investigations. And we're so proud to have him back in the saddle again. And we'll be talking to him, and that is going to be epic. It's going to be a lot of fun. So please join us next month. Now, today's presentation is going to be our interview with this amazing woman, Dr. Irena Scott. She's a former MUFON consultant of astronomy and physiology. She's a former MUFON board of director, and the list goes on from there. As a matter of fact, she has been on the board from 1993 to 2000, and she is also a former MUFON consultant in physiology and astronomy and a former certified field investigator. She's also the former director of publications, and she has edited 8 symposium proceedings, and that's no small thing in and of itself. She is also, has been at Cornell postdoctorate, her PhD at St. Bonaventure, professor OSU, and the alumni Polaris CEO at Battelle, and DIA. She's also an author, a speaker, and is the professor at Bonaventure University, postdoctoral research scientist at Cornell University, former research pharmacokinetics at Battelle, former physical scientist cartographer at Aerospace Center, former teaching and research assistant at the University Las Vegas, former analyst GS11 at the Defense Intelligence Agency, former contributing editor at Popular Mechanics, former toxicologist at Ohio Department of Health, and a former researcher at the Medical School of Ohio State University College of Medicine. She's also a former astronomer at the Ohio State University Radio Observatory. There isn't much that she hasn't done. She's also the former aerial photogrammetrist at Lowry Air Force Base in Colorado. She has worked at Google and studied at College of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Missouri. She studied physiology, developed assays at Cornell University, and studied zoology, astronomy, mathematics, chemistry at the Ohio State University. So please join me in welcoming this amazing woman with quite the interesting past. Welcome to the show, Dr. Irena Scott.
Well, thank you very much. I'm certainly happy to be here and very honored that you asked me.
Oh, it's just wonderful. I read your resume and I was looking at that thinking, some of the people that have been involved with MUFON are I believe, some of the brightest humans on the planet. And I just love this. A lot of times people say, oh, MUFON's just a bunch of people getting together into UFOs, the aluminum hat wearing group. And I think, no, not at all. These are some of the brightest minds on the planet today, and we're so glad to have you still with us and still here. And I want to hear everything about you, really, that you've got such a background. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've got an upcoming birthday this month, so happy birthday.
Thank you.
And I guess it's on the 31st, and you're also, with all those other things that we mentioned, you're also a member of Mensa. Very impressive, Dr. Irena. So you live on a lovely farm in Ohio. I've seen many of the pictures that you post on Facebook, and I just love all of these old farm family pictures. So beautiful, such a wonderful story your life has been. And you also mention frequently that you have black helicopters flying over your house. What's that all about?
I don't know. It's sort of a joke, but there's a lot of black helicopters flying over, and I photograph them and joke about them. Since recently, though, I've got flight radar, and so I can identify a lot of them and figure out what they are. Some of them are blocked, though, or they don't show up.
Well, they seem to be watching your property. Kind of interesting, huh?
Be on a helicopter route or something.
Well, so tell me, going way back, how did you initially get involved in MUFON? Or not just MUFON, but ufology as a whole?
Well, I didn't get involved for a long time. I had the very first UFO thing that happened to me was when I was about 6 years old. But I went into science, and I had a family. My parents didn't talk about UFOs at all, and we'd get mad if we did. And so I didn't talk about it for many, many, many years. And I was in science, so it's not something you go around talking about anyway. You don't say, I see UFOs. But eventually, I decided to go ahead and say something about it and get involved.
Good. And I know that you had an experience that we're going to talk about. Had any of your family previously had experiences?
My sister and I had an experience when we were very young children, and it was years before we ever even heard of UFOs. And it was many, many years later before we figured out it had to do with UFOs. But we had an experience when we were real young.
Oh, interesting. So you weren't alone in the family then, growing up and knowing all this. So let's talk about your experience. I kind of want to get right into that. I've got a lot of other questions, but it started with your ball lightning, and you wrote a book about all of that?
Yeah, I had a ball lightning sighting when I was about 5 years old, but I think it was just standard ball lightning.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was around 6, my sister and I, we were very poor and grew up in an old farmhouse. And we slept in an attic room with the walls that slant up and go together at the ceiling. And she was about 4 and I was about 6, as close as we can estimate. We both remember it, so does the whole family, but it was something we didn't forget, even though we didn't understand it for a long time. But it was a nice, clear night. I have ways of checking that, although I don't know the date. And we'd both just gone to bed and gone to sleep in beds on the opposite sides of the room. Well, I woke up and there was this thing flying around the room. And it wasn't something I never heard of UFOs or spaceships or anything else. We were just poor and we didn't even we had a radio, but that was about all the media we had. And so this thing was flying around the room. It didn't blink, and it wasn't anything like a lightning bug, and I had no idea what it was.
How big was it?
It was kind of small. It was about maybe an inch or less. They say, they compare things to the Tic Tac now. Mm-hmm. Well, this is like an actual Tic Tac back then.
Yeah.
Although they didn't have Tic Tacs then, but it's sort of what it looked like. And it was kind of like the color of real hot iron, mm-hmm. and it glowed. And it was flying around, and I had no idea what it was, and it was curious, mm-hmm. and it got close to both of us, and I noticed that it never bumped into anything, that it would fly and came to a wall, it would turn. If it went around furniture and things like that. So it never bumped into anything. And it was dark in the room, but it was like it was alive. It was like it could see. And at that young age, I knew this is pretty strange.
Yeah, definitely.
So, after it flew around the room some, and it got close to both of us. And I don't remember talking to my sister at all about it, but she apparently woke up before I did. And then it flew up to the ceiling, but it turned before it got to the ceiling, and we had a chandelier in the middle of the room that was turned off. So it followed the ceiling, and it went to the chandelier. And the chandelier was down between these walls that came together at the top. And it didn't feel its way around or anything, it just came to the chandelier. And then it started circling. It didn't bump into any walls or the chandelier. It circled and circled and circled and circled and circled. And then it came down a spiral under it. And then all of a sudden, my sister and I just were absolutely terrified, just beyond anything. And we started screaming, and that's when I realized she saw it, and ran out of the room. And we were so terrified, we bumped into each other and fell down the stair steps, and then we couldn't get the door open. So we were screaming to our parents, and they didn't believe us. So it's something that everybody remembered because we told our family about it, and we didn't associate with UFOs. It was years before I heard of UFOs, so it wasn't anything, we just didn't know what it was. But we told the whole family. A lot of people remembered it, and some of my cousins were scared to go up in that room even. And so it was years before I ever heard of UFOs, and I didn't associate that with a UFO anyway, because I thought they were big like airplanes back then.
Yeah.
And years later, Jenny Randles wrote a book about, it was called Star Children or something. Oh. And she, this was many years later, told about how young kids sometimes see UFOs as adults repeatedly, have experiences when they're young of small UFOs. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like we did, except that usually it's one person, and in our case it was two, because we had an experience when we were young and again when we were older, and together. Yeah, but
wonderful.
I didn't have any idea it had anything to do with UFOs until then.
Mm-hmm. So the whole family knew about it, and everybody was okay. Did they think you were crazy? I mean, back in that day, were they accepting of that?
Well, we didn't. It wasn't like we saw a UFO because we didn't have any idea what the thing was. But they weren't accepting. My parents just said, "You're crazy," and then Dad said he'd beat us up if we didn't go back upstairs, and we didn't go. So he went back upstairs and said, "Oh, it's safe, nothing's there." And we were not thrilled about going back up, but we did.
Uh-huh.
But we told the family about it because, if we'd known about UFOs and said UFOs, everybody said you're crazy.
Yeah.
But we didn't know anything about them. And normally, if that happened to a kid and it happened to one kid, they would say you dreamed it. Yeah. But there were two of us, and we weren't even talking to each other when it happened. So, it was something we could show that, it wasn't a dream, it was something that really happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course it did. Yeah, and it scared you. Got your attention.
Really, really scary. I don't know why I was so scared either, because at first I wasn't scared at all, and then suddenly just wham, I was just absolutely terrified.
Yeah, and in your estimation, it was intelligently moving, not just floating around. It was moving with intention.
Yeah, because it seemed to know where the walls were and where the furniture was and where we were actually,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't bump into anything. It didn't reverse. If it would come to something, it would turn.
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed to me like it was intentional. I mean, I couldn't think of any reason why it wouldn't just bump into something. If it was, if it was a lightning bug, it would blink on and off and look like a
Right.
lightning bug.
Yeah. And they're very sporadic. They're
Yeah,
not, yeah, they're very different. I have those all over here in Tennessee where we are at night. They're absolutely beautiful, but they don't stay on more than just a second,
no.
you know. And they'll blink and then they won't.
Yeah, this didn't blink at all, and it glowed.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't the color of a lightning bug, and it was a different shape and size.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And you have equated this with a lightning ball.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I mean, at the time,
You
it
didn't.
happened, I did.
Yeah.
But then when I learned about UFOs, and then I equated it with a UFO because the lightning ball, this was tiny, and tiny ones just last a real short time. This one lasted a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Lightning balls are, you know, they aren't alive, and this thing seemed to be directed and seemed to know where it was going.
Mm-hmm. As you look back, do you ever feel that there was any type of a mental telepathy or any type of communication at all as you look back now that you look at it with a bigger vision, you're older, wiser?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at that time, I just remember the terror, and that's about all.
Mm-hmm.
But now, and thinking about it, I think there was some kind of mind control because we both apparently woke up about the same time. My sister might have woke up just a little bit before I did. We had no idea how it got in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and we both woke up and it was there, and we don't know why we woke up or how it got in there. And then we both became terrified at exactly the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like there was some kind of mind control going on, but that's my later thoughts.
Right, right. That's just it. When you're little, I mean, I've had many experiences from when I was little, which I couldn't understand at all. Didn't make any sense. And of course, they happened to me, and I was trying to explain them, and nobody could understand where I was coming from. People back in that day, when we were younger, this wasn't a subject that was readily spoken much about. So. Of course, as you get older and you look back at it with a fresh set of eyes and understanding, then you can see that this was a deliberate action. It came into the room, wanted your attention, woke you up, exposed itself to you in this way that it interacted with you both, scared you because you were young, and yet there was so much more happening, in that moment. And I do believe in the data dumps because I've had them. They give you something or they interact with you in a way that you're not aware of at the time. You have no idea what exactly is happening in that moment, but something is happening in that moment. And I wonder if that is what put you on your course and your future and gave you this desire to follow the path that you've been on. It's been a wonderful path. You've been amazing as you've moved forward in your life. And I'm wondering if that wasn't an inspirational moment for you somehow through some data dump that you received from that extraterrestrial. And many years of studying UFOs were really just that. We were studying UFOs. We weren't really focused on what was the power motivating the movement and who was in control of that. What's your thoughts on that now?
Well, my thought is that I always wanted to be an astronomer, and I didn't have any idea why, because nobody else in my family had anything to do. And I tried and tried, but they didn't take females. And I tried all kinds of occupations, such as physical science and cartographer, and got into the DIA and the spy satellite business, and then went ahead and got a PhD from the University of Missouri, but I couldn't get into astronomy because they just didn't have females. And that led me into science. I don't know if it had anything to do with that early experience, because at the time I wasn't aware of UFOs or astronomy or anything else. I'm just a kid.
Right. It's interesting how we get hooked. It's like a divine intervention. We're just brought into that field, even though we're not sure about it. You know, I mean, you couldn't get in as a female, so now you're into another field, but it's still related. And, you know, here you are today after all these years. But we are interested today in what is maneuvering the crafts, who is maneuvering the crafts, why they're maneuvering them towards us. You know, what is their intention? What do you think about that?
Well, when that happened, all we saw was just this tiny little thing. But there was evidence that it influenced our mind, because we both woke up at the same time. We both became terrified at the same time. And so, you know, I was wondering if the phenomena can make you see whatever it wants you to see. Because, you know, maybe some little thing like that does influence your mind. I mean, I don't know. But all we did was just see something. But it had a pretty good effect, because even now, from then on, I was scared of north-facing windows. It was a north-facing window in the house, and I still am.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, when it gets dark, the first thing I do is close the blinds in the north windows, and I still have an effect from it this long afterwards. But I don't know, you know, what it was, or, you know, if something just made us see this little thing or what. Because it said in the book that there's a trend of people that have experience of small things like UFOs and later have, you know, experience with regular UFOs. And so I wondered if there's some kind of mind control or something that affects you. And then you see them later, but I don't understand any of it.
Well, yeah, that's just it. You know, do any of us really understand what it's all about? I would think initially my first thought would be, because it was so small, it was like something that was coming in from somewhere else. There was something bigger sending it out as like a scout to see what was going on in the house, and wanted to implant these thoughts in your mind that this exists, and it's real, and it's like opening your mind, like through mental telepathy, or like even just viewing you and your sister in the room. It's funny because my sister and I lived up in a attic bedroom too, and I've had experiences up there, and believe me, it's, when you're little, it's epic. It's epic. It does really form a lot of the things that you do in the future. You know, like you say, fear. You still have that fear today of closing that north window. I close them all because it wasn't just a north window I had my experience in. But it was hard to ever be able to sleep with the lights off for me, because, you know, that meant I could see things possibly that I shouldn't be seeing, and I didn't want to do that, you know, so a long time I kept the lights on. But anyway, I think that it is so interesting that could have been something that was being sent into your room from a much bigger ship, like a probe of some sort.
Or I wondered if something was there and they can make you see anything they want you to see.
Mm-hmm. I got it. I got what you're saying. Exactly.
I mean, I suppose something small could affect us because, you know, I mean, like circuitry now, you know, it's tiny, but you can get all kinds of information. I don't know, you know, what you can do with small things or big things or anything else,
right.
Or whether the same UFO can be small or big and take any appearance to a human.
Right, and it's like back in that day, we did, like you said, not too many people would have TVs. They would just have radios, and of course the TVs that came in, my parents did have a TV when I was growing up, but we were one of the first families on the block that had a TV, and it was the big doings, to have a TV. And people would come over with their, their beers and their popcorn to watch TV at our house. It was a big deal. But anyway, my point is that today a TV is this big in the palm of your hand, and it's also a calculator, it's also a telephone, it's also so many other things. But that first TV probably weighed 800 pounds. It was very hard to move, and it was in the biggest cabinet. I mean, it was ridiculous. You could keep a whole book of encyclopedias on top of that thing, and that was the big thing then too, encyclopedias, and I loved them. I just read those and eat them up. But, look at where we are today from where we were then, and how that was so tiny, and it seemed like back in that day it couldn't be anything like a probe or something else, but I bet, and I'm sure that it was. Or like you say, it cloaked itself, so to speak, and became something that didn't frighten you because of what you were seeing, but it did frighten you, but the other might have been more than you could have bore or something, so it chose to interact with you like this. Just astounding how and will we ever really know? Will we ever really know? I guess once we cross the veil and we're on the other side, and we can look back and say, roll them, and go back to that day and visit that moment. I'm looking forward to it. And, getting that information at that time and having it clarified. I was just talking to Steve Hudgens the other day, and he said, it's really something, because it is really hard to understand what we do experience when we're experiencing things. They seem to know. We don't. We don't seem to grasp what's truly happening, And I don't know. I love that, though. I mean, I love being communicated with. I love having the data dumps, and even though I don't understand them, I know that it's important. It's important for the future of humanity to have these experiences, and just to understand that it's such a bigger picture than what we thought we knew,
One thing that was funny is that years later, I reported our UFO sightings, and I had family members write it up. Well, my mother had always been a skeptic, and she didn't allow us to even talk about UFOs. But I asked her to write it up, and what she wrote up is that we were in the bedroom, and something came in through the window, and it flew around the room, and then it disappeared, and then it was like we were released from something, and we became terrified. And I don't know why she would say that, because she wasn't there.
Oh, isn't that interesting? And yet she was connecting with it.
Yeah, somehow
oh my gosh.
Had a different explanation, and it, I mean, we don't know how it got in there, but she had an explanation for it.
Well, from your testimony to her ears, she was trying to relate best she could what you had told her. And I'm sure she was very concerned about you girls. You're her babies. She wants to protect you.
Well, she didn't believe us, so.
She wouldn't believe you. Oh.
But that's why I know it was a clear night, because she was worried about lightning. She'd had a lightning bolt experience herself, but she was afraid of, in a storm, that we had an old house and old trees around it. She was afraid the trees would fall down. And so whenever there was a storm or anything like that, she made us come downstairs. And so I know it was a clear night. I mean, they said, lightning bolts can be during an electric storm, but this was not during an electric storm. This was during a clear night. We remember it. And then also, if there had been any type of storm, we would have been downstairs.
Isn't it interesting? And here, that happened when you were 6.
Around 6.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
around 6. I'm not sure. My sister said she wasn't in school yet, and I can't remember whether I was in school or not, so I'm just guessing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was 5 when I had my first one, but yeah, it's funny, you can't remember clearly some things, and other things are so crystal clear you could never forget them, you know. But I love that. I mean, I love that these things are so very other than us and so very different, and yet communicating. And I do believe they do lead us down that path. Because, in 1979, when I had my first experience, I was going in this direction. And then I had the craft appear to me and the extraterrestrial. And I went in the complete opposite direction of where I was headed in my life because of those experiences. They are life-changing. And then they lead you in a different direction than what you may have, chosen yourself. And I do believe that's why you are who you are today and why you took on all that you took on. It was a deep-seated interest that you wanted answers to. And back in those days, you didn't have MUFON. You didn't have somebody you could just go to and say, you're the UFO people, the go-to people, the gold standard people. Who do you talk to? And I remember my friends used to say, well, I never had an experience like that. Something's wrong with you. And I thought, well, yeah, nothing's wrong with me. I'm quite normal. And yet, then I met people who had had those experiences, and even experiences more bizarre than my own, which I'm sure you've met people like that. And, you wrote books about them, the Pascagoula, encounters, and those are just stunning. I'd like to talk to you about that too. So much research has gone into all of the things that you've written, and you got involved with the Pascagoula case. What drew you first to that?
Well, what drew me, first of all, there were 2 things. One is that I'd written, Philip Mantle of Flying Disc Press had published my books. Mm-hmm. And then he published the book by Kelvin Parker, who hadn't talked about his experience for 50 years or so.
Oh, wow.
But there were other witnesses down there at that time. And he's in the UK and has a UK accent. And Kelvin Parker was down in Mississippi and had, Southern accent. And, it's like 2 different languages. And I was sort of in between. And he wanted somebody to interview people and asked me to do it and tape them. And that was one reason. The other reason, though, was that the Pascagoula thing happened in October the 11th, 1973. Well, at that time, I was at the University of Missouri studying for my PhD, and my mother was in Ohio, which is about 600 miles away. Mm-hmm. And I got this phone call from my mother, and she said, did you hear that noise? And she had always said, she shows signs of dementia that I should tell her. And so she was a skeptic anyway so I just told her, you're crazy, go to the insane asylum. It's all over, and teased her. And then I didn't pay too much attention to it, except I thought, my mother said that. But then sometime about a week later, she called and said there was this huge UFO flap going on, and that people were staying in their basements and keeping their kids in, and one chased her friend's car, and the governor saw one, and everybody was seeing him. And that didn't make too much impression on me. I just thought about it and forgot about it. But years later, I was working at Ohio State University, and they had a library with actual newspapers. And for some reason, I just on a whim, I decided to go in and see if I could find when that noise was. Because I remember there was a flap later. And so I had no idea when it was, and there were zillions and zillions and zillions of newspapers, and I thought, I'll never find it. And I thought I remembered it as the middle of October in 73. And so I went in there, and there were millions of papers on that date. But I started looking, and I found it immediately. And I didn't pay attention to the date or anything, but it was the same date as the Pascagoula abduction, which, I wrote the book on. So that actually got me into UFOs, because I was interested in the sound and just the scientific interest. And I did some investigation, and there was this big sound, but no explanation for where it came from or why. And so I submitted to a scientific journal, and the state seismologist of Ohio contacted me and was interested and helped me look for information. And I published it in a scientific journal. Mm-hmm. I hadn't paid attention to UFOs at all then, although I'd had sightings. But then Ohio had UFO people, and they asked me to give a talk. Mm-hmm. And so I did, and called it Big Bang and things. But that's what drew me into UFOs, and I met UFO people and joined things. But actually, the Pascagoula thing, even though I hadn't paid attention to the abduction at all, was what pulled me in, because the sound was at the same time as the abduction. But the abduction was down in Mississippi, and the sound was up, went through Ohio and different places. Mm-hmm. But it was about the same time.
Uh-huh. So that's what got you involved in that, and then the rest is history.
Yeah.
And that's such a beautiful case. I mean, that's an interesting, very in-depth case with a lot of really interesting interactions with the men and the extraterrestrials, the ship, that's a wonderful case.
Well, it's one where the people actually remembered it happening consciously immediately afterwards and reported it immediately afterwards. And they were questioned very well, very in an intelligent way by the authorities, too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it was, totally different than a lot of things where somebody remembers it years later and may or may not say anything about it. Mm-hmm.
And that was prevalent back in that time because, like even with me, when I shared with my mom what had happened to me, I was working for Honeywell Aerospace at the time as a secretary, and my sister was also a secretary with Honeywell Aerospace, but my mother was working there as well, and she ended up retiring from there in a management position like 30 years later. But I was only there for a couple of years, and we were working on the Minuteman project, and then they were looking at the Gemini project and some of the other ones. And I worked, like I said, in secretarial, so I wasn't really into any of that. I was just there getting paid wonderfully for the job that I was doing. And I do remember just before I left that two armed guards came in with a box to be printed, and they asked me if I would go into the print room and print these, but it was very strict. I couldn't look at anything. I had to pick it up upside down, make sure I had one paper at a time, lay it on the printer, print it, and then put it in another box, and then go over to this box, pick it up, make sure I had one, put it on the printer, print it, and put it in the other box, with guys with guns. And I thought to myself, okay, something's going on here. It must be pretty big, and of course it was. The Honeywell Aerospace was involved in a lot of things back in those days, but McDonnell Douglas, a lot of that, Raytheon. There were just so many things right there in Florida where I live, St. Petersburg, although that aerospace, Honeywell, was in Clearwater. But anyway, she said to me, don't ever tell anybody anything about your experience because you'll never get hired back here again. And the what?
Yeah, we had the other experience later, but I was working for the Defense Intelligence Agency with a sky-high security clearance. And it happened to us, but I sure didn't say anything. But I did take notes immediately afterwards, and I found out my sister did too.
Isn't that interesting? See, there was some kind of, I don't know that I can say that working for Honeywell Aerospace had anything to do with that, mine. Because that was in the early 70s, and my experience was 79. So I don't know, why would they wait 8 or 9 years later to, who knows? But I do know that it did change my life completely. And I was not a believer, didn't want to be a believer, thought it was comic book entertainment, a big fat waste of time. I wasn't into comic books. I wouldn't even read fiction stories as a child. I thought to myself, my mind is pure, let me keep it that way. Let me keep truth and only truth. I just don't want to know about things that aren't real.
You sound like my mother.
Yeah, I was different, but I really wanted to know all of what was true in this life, because, I mean, after all, we're all on a journey, right? We're here. We don't really understand why when we're little, although I was asking everybody, why are we here? And nobody really knew. Just do your chores and get this done, go to school, be good, blah, blah, blah. Okay, is this all there is? I was asking questions as a very young girl. There must have been a purpose for it all. And kids don't usually ask those questions, so I was ignored. And then when I had my experiences, I was also ignored. So that seemed to be the norm, being ignored. And I got very comfortable with that, actually. It didn't seem to bother me. I thought, well, if they're not having it, I don't know what to say about that, but I am, and you did, and something happened. I just love that. I love that we were chosen somehow to be interacted with out of no desire of our own. Little kids, we didn't want anything to do with any of that, We didn't even know about it.
Yeah.
And if you'd have told me about it, I'd have thought it was like cartoonish or something. I probably wouldn't have believed it anyway. But all these years later, I find it really valuable information and, having these experiences and meeting the people, like you met all these people who just grace your life with their experiences. And isn't it marvelous, Mind-opening.
Yeah, it's mind-opening. I don't know, I can't say marvelous because I have no idea what it is.
I know. I don't really believe anybody does. I really don't think we have any answers because there's not enough physical proof. There are many experiences, but physical proof is lacking. And so in that, we have to keep studying and keep studying. And the beautiful thing about MUFON is we're boots on the ground. We're looking, we're studying, we're going after every single hint of what is happening. Nobody else does that. And now today, we're moving into NASA is now getting involved, and our government is even getting involved. Disclosure is definitely on the horizon. A lot of people say that it'll never happen, but I know that it will. I'm positive that it will, actually. I don't know why I know that, but that I do know. And at some point, it will break through. And
this is a lot farther than it's ever gone when it started in 1947, they did have disclosure. Project Sign, entertain the idea. This is something we don't understand. Then he had Project Grudge and Project Blue Book, said there's nothing to it. And they said that for the next 50 years, but now they're getting back to where they started. And nobody could believe that they would do that, even go that far, which isn't very far.
Well, true. And, we had been lied to for so long about everything and kept in the dark on purpose. Our government, I'm not sure this is true, but according to them, they didn't know that we could handle the truth. They didn't believe that humanity was ready for the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But I find that very hard to believe because they were very much into remote viewing. They were very much into trying to find things out, through psychic and different avenues. They really wanted to know what this was all about, the enigma, the UFO enigma, and they wanted more information. Now, we hear that, Eisenhower and Nixon and different presidents, Jimmy Carter, some of them had profound experiences. And so things were leaking. The best way to keep a secret, of course, is to tell everybody, right? Start leaking it all over the place and call it a secret. And so that happened, and we are where we are today. But what is known does seem to still be for eyes only, certain eyes, certain classifications of clearances and that sort of thing. And people are talking more and more now. A lot of people that have passed have said they didn't want to die, with all of this knowledge and not share it before they left. And boy, I'm grateful to those people, you know. But we still don't have any absolutes. You know, we don't have a dead body that has been disclosed to us. You know, we have different things that people have said that there are bodies and they've seen this or they've seen that. Philip Snyder, wasn't that his name? Phil Snyder or Sinclair? I can't remember his name. Don't quote me.
I've heard of Sinclair.
Yeah, he was the one who got involved with the Green Berets and had his fingers cut off and had his chest opened by a fight. No. The fight with the Schneider, Philip Schneider, and anyway, many stories have come forth, but we don't have a ton of proof. You know, and this is an issue. This is an issue.
Yeah, that's why I was interested in that sound, was because it was heard by zillions of people. It went over about 1,000 miles. It went over Washington, D.C., and there were a lot of witnesses, but no explanation on what it was, and it didn't exactly
Had you heard it yourself?
No, it was just my mother.
I heard it in Florida.
You did?
I did. And I went outside, and I listened into the sky, and I stood there listening to that sound, and in my mind's eye I saw a huge, massive dumpster being dragged over the concrete on a street, and that's what it sounded like. However, it was coming from above, not below. And
did you hear it at the same time?
Pardon me?
Did you hear it at the same time as that? As the sound?
Thousands upon thousands of people in the city heard it. And people were phoning each other, "Do you hear that?" And we're like, "We hear it." The other thought I thought it could be was something going on underground, like some big, huge, massive yeah.
No, they looked for earthquakes and they couldn't find any earthquakes.
No, there were, no. It wasn't related to anything like that. But it just seemed like there was something digging or pulsing forward from underneath, but then it sounded like it was coming from the sky, depending on which way you turned your head. And it was really strange and powerful. It was a powerful sound. And I felt like maybe it was just something, of course, living in Florida, I was in St. Petersburg at the time, and Florida, St. Petersburg is only about 20 miles from Tampa over the Howard Franklin Bridge, and that's where MacDill Air Force Base is, and that's Central Command for the United States of America. So I thought, you know, what are they doing over there? You know, what could they be testing or doing here? Are they looking to do some type of an underwater tunnel, which is not absurd? We have those, you know. And I thought, I don't know what they're doing. Perhaps that's what they're doing. But when I called around, I called the police, I called TIA, Tampa International Airport, I called a lot of people. And I'm like, do you hear that? What is that? Yeah, we don't know. Okay, you know. So there were no answers available.
Yeah, people running out of their houses and calling the they actually had fire department runs and had jets looking for them and radar and everything else, and they didn't find anything.
I do think that our military know exactly what that was, but they weren't sharing that with us. You know, nobody was sharing that with us. But it did sound unbelievable. I mean, had my ears not heard it, it would be hard to believe. And then a few months later, I heard that they heard it in California, and it was recorded. I did not record it that day, and I don't know why, but I didn't. And it was recorded in some other places, and I thought, yep, that's the exact same sound we had here. It was worldwide. They were having it all over, many different places. But in the United States, it was prevalent. We never did figure out what it was. And everybody thought perhaps it was extraterrestrial. And I thought it could have been extraterrestrial, and it could have been our military. So that would be great to be disclosed at some point.
Yeah, it was a lot different from, I had a debunker that said it was the SR-71, but it was far more widespread than any sonic boom.
SR-71 doing what? Hovering over each city?
Well, it was way bigger than a sonic boom from the SR-71.
Oh, that was no sonic boom.
Yeah,
that would reverberate it and would have had a different sound. I would have identified that. I would have said, "Oh, okay." I mean, I was a certified field investigator at the time. I'm like, I don't know what is that. I don't know what that is. I cannot identify it. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing. Well, do you have anything else you want to share with us about this, your book with the Pascagoula case?
Well, we found a lot of other witnesses that saw something down there at the same time. And when they called the sheriff, there had been about 50 people, around 50 people that reported things actually then, and a lot more that didn't make formal reports. But nobody got their name in the newspaper because nobody wanted to talk about it back then. But people are coming forward now. And we have a lot of people that saw things that same night, that same time, but they didn't say anything, except to their families and things like that. And then, Philip Mantle, he's just like Sherlock Holmes or something. He managed, I can't believe how far back he went, and he got all kinds of documents and things. And so he and I are writing another book for next year. But it's amazing how much you can actually find from way back then.
It is. There is a lot of information that's been written and stored, and we can get to it. You just have to know where to go to get it. One thing about that Pascagoula case was that the drawing of the extraterrestrial that was seen is really bizarre, different than like what I've seen. I've seen a tall white, I've seen grays and two different reptilians, and it was so completely different. What was your thoughts about that when you first saw that?
Well, due to my experience when I was a kid, I thought they can take any shape that they are something that project into your mind, and they can just project anything. They said they behaved like a robot and things like that. Well, we send robots to other planets and all that. So, they sort of have a standard UFO not thing of, a slender little thing with big eyes, but that's not what they saw. But theirs was definitely different from everything else, but in a way it shows they're telling the truth, because, if they were making it up, why wouldn't they look up what a alien looks like and describe it? But they didn't. This was something totally different.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember when I saw mine, he was very different than really what most people would think that they look like, because he was so thin, and nobody had ever drawn anything that thin. And I thought, this is like bone, But it wasn't a bone man. I mean, it was very strange, and it didn't look like bone. But the light went right through it. Like if you've ever held your thumb up to a light and seen inside your thumb, you could see right straight through this this extraterrestrial's body, just like that. Like you were holding it up to a light. It came right straight through it. Well, it wasn't ghost-like, but it came right straight through it. It was really strange. And you did not see a bone structure, which was also very strange. I'm having some background in the medical field and being, somebody that can read x-rays. That's what I'm looking for, bone. So it wasn't there. So that was interesting.
Well, at Pascagoula, about less than a month later, they had an underwater object and they had they had a lot of witnesses, and this was taken seriously. And one of the Coast Guard men said that they didn't know what it was, that when they held an oar over the object and the light came up, that went right through the oar, that it wasn't like the oar would make a shadow, that the light would go right through it. And so that sounds like what you're saying too.
Yeah, the light went right straight through it. It was really bizarre, quite frightening, incredibly ugly, and I didn't want to look at it. You know, just like if you were standing next to a grizzly bear or something, you don't want to look at that thing. You don't want to make eye contact. You don't want any issue here. You know, you just want to go on your way and get out of this as quick as possible. You know, nothing to aggravate the moment. And yeah, they're very powerful, these extraterrestrial presences that are here, definitely here. And I like what you say about they appear to be whatever to the person, like they're giving you this I don't even know how to put that into words. They're like
in your mind.
Yeah, they're controlling your mind to cause you to see whatever they want you to see. Is that what he really looked like? You know, or did I just see what he did look like? You know, so that's an interesting point. And because I had never seen anything like that, that's very bizarre to me, you know. So I'm thinking that he was just showing me who he was. But there's so many that are so different, and those that are in the water, the USOs, you know, obviously those beings can go underwater. I don't know that all of them can. Perhaps they can't, you know, or some crafts do and some don't. My mother saw the ones that were in the water and shot up out of the Gulf of Mexico. I didn't see those. She saw those. All mine came to me, you know, either late at night, or you know, in the room, you know, woke me up. Something happened and I woke up, you know. So it's so interesting to me how different they all are. And yours came to you like mine came to me in the night in your bedroom. You know, that's pretty private. You know, that's really, you know.
My sister and I, when we were older, we had, you know, another experience too. And in that case, I was talking to a man, and I thought he was a man up until recently. And my sister just recently found something she'd written, a letter she wrote to my mother right immediately after it happened, which I did too. But I wondered if this was a man or if it was not a man. And I'm beginning to think now it wasn't, but it just looked like a man, but it acted very, very strange. I'm thinking maybe it wasn't.
It's interesting because everyone I've had identified as a man, because the voice was male, definitely not female. There was nothing soft or warm about it. It was very, and of course they're not conversationalists. What they say is exactly what you need to hear, and that's it. You know, very few words. And
well, he told me that I was crazy and I wasn't seeing the UFO when my sister and I was staying there watching it.
Oh my goodness.
And then he tried to kill us.
Who did?
This thing we saw that looked like a man, the truck driver.
Oh my goodness. That's crazy.
It's quite an experience.
Well, a lot of those things do get very, very bizarre sometimes, and I'm not sure why. You know, I'm not sure why that happens with some people. You know, everything to a certain point is like, wow, and then it gets so bizarre, you know. And I know that they can cause you not to remember things, can cause you not to be able to get back to that moment. You can't seem to figure out, how did this happen? You know, I was in my car. I said to myself, whatever you do, don't get out of the car. The next thing you know, my hand's on the door. I'm opening it and I'm out of the car. And I'm like, now, why did I do that? You know, they're very controlling. And you know, it's very interesting. And they don't all look alike, and they all act very differently. Personally, I've never heard of anyone who has seen anything female. It's always been more in the male realm, and that's very interesting to me as well. But gosh, there's so many questions and so much to ask still, but we are at that hour, and 10 minutes, and
Okay.
yeah, we get to the end of all this, but I want to thank you for coming on, and I know that you are on Facebook, and if people want to reach out to you, they can go to Irena McCammon, C-A-M-M-O-N, McCammon.
McCammon, Scott.
I know, I'm having a problem with speaking all of a sudden. Scott. So
Yeah.
Dr. Irena McCammon Scott. And that's how you're listed on Facebook. I don't know if the doctor is there, but I know it's Irena. And,
Yeah.
Okay. Or you can go to irenascott.com. That's your website. And they could probably reach out to you there and ask you questions. And thank you so much for coming on. This has really been really wonderful. And I hope that we have inspired people by just sharing, just chatting and having a moment together like this. It's just so wonderful. I'm so grateful that you were available. And thank you for all your years of service to MUFON and all that you added to who we are today. It's because of people like you who made the sacrifices to volunteer and hang in there through all of, that ufology has gone through the years. I'm very grateful for that.
Well, thank you for everything you're doing. You're certainly doing a whole lot. And
I love it. I love it. I feel so drawn to it. It's me. It's totally me. So I want to just thank all of the listeners, too, for coming on, and we hope that you'll come back with us next month as we have our Director of Investigations, Steve Hudgens, on. I'm looking forward to that very much. He's just wonderful. I'm glad he's back in the saddle and keeping on. So thanks again for being here. Have a wonderful weekend, what's left of it, and we'll see you next month. And don't forget to show up at the MUFON Symposium in Denver, just in 2 weeks. Okay. All right. See you then. Yes. Awesome. Thank you.